In this video, I'm going to be looking at 3 rejections of miracles. Now, we all know David Hume. He rejected miracles not just on theoretical ground, on practical grounds as well. And he was against them. But he didn't say miracles were impossible to happen. He just said they were impossible to know that they happened. And so the 3 views I want to look at are the views of Alastair MacKinnon, scientific rejection, and Antony Flew's rejection. Now, Alastair MacKinnon's rejection, he goes one step ahead from David Hume, because what he ends up saying is not just are they impossible to know, they are impossible to happen. So what he says laws of nature are basically they're descriptive sentences which describe a course of action. So, I drop my pen, the pen falls to the floor. Gravity causes the pen to fall on the floor. This is just a descriptive statement. All laws of nature do is they describe a course of action. Now, I personally don't agree with this definition. You don't have to too, but this is what McKinnon says. And then he says that if you think about it, what are miracles? They're transgression of a law of nature by the violation of a particular deity or an invisible agent, according to David Hume. So they're basically violations of laws of nature. That's what miracles are. But how can you have a violation of a law of nature when a law of nature is simply a description of the course of events which happen? You can't have a violation of something which is just describing a course of action, because that is what happened. It's illogical, it's absurd. So on these grounds, he goes, miracles are basically impossible. But what he doesn't realize is that he categorizes miracles as natural events, and he says that, you know, we have to treat them this, you know, like basically what criticism I'm trying to come up with here is what criticism goes to Hume, Flew, scientific rejection. We'll see it goes to all of them, that they're putting miracles in this kind of category of laws of nature and all this. It might be something else. It might be an event which happens in the world but is caused by something out of the world, a deity, something we can't explain. So that's my first criticism. And the second criticism is a law of nature is not just a description of a course of it. A law of nature is something which describes regularity, pattern of events. You know, a law of nature is not simply saying the sun rose today. The law of nature is saying it is unlikely or near to impossible that the sun will not rise in any morning. It makes predictions. It's a hypothesis. It's more than that, laws of nature. Science is more than that. This is why a lot of people, they reject the views of Alastair MacKinnon, but I guess it's an interesting suggestion he put forward. We can't admire him for that. Then I wanted to look at scientific rejection. And what I want to look at here is something called methodological naturalism, which basically says science can never, this is a fact, it can never ever accept miracles, the divine, supernatural, any of these elements. Now, why is this? Because what science is all about, it's about seeing what happens in the world, like statistical laws, as Swinburne says, whether something is probable or not probable to happen. So when something which is unlikely, uncertain, improbable to happen happens, what do? Is we look at it and we do more research and we realize that actually the law that we believed in before is incorrect and there's a new law. Or we say this is an exception to the law and it was caused by this, so therefore there can be exceptions. That's what science does. Now, if when these laws of nature are broken, we sat and we said this is to do with God, the supreme, the divine. If we did that, then research would just stop, because there would be no need to research and update people's work and see whether the laws are right. That's not what science is. Science would just stop. It would be like back in the olden days where people didn't have science, they only had God. So this is what, so science is basically saying that science can never go towards the divine, supernatural, and everything, because science would stop, research would stop. So scientifically, miracles are rejected. They cannot be accepted. They are just taken as blips or something different, an anomaly, something like that. So Antony Flew, now what he says is that his argument is very simple. I'm going to put it to you like this. So he starts with saying, if we're going to look at the debates surrounding miracles, then miracles must be identifiable. Oh yeah, and just so you know, Antony Flew, he is not like Alastair MacKinnon, who goes on to say miracles are just impossible, full stop. He, like Hume, says that miracles may occur, but they are impossible to know that they occur. So what he says is that if we are going to get anywhere with this debate, we have to be able to identify miracles. How can we identify miracles? Well, there's two ways. We can either see them as natural events, or we can see them as supernatural events. Now, we don't want to see them as supernatural effect. Why is that? Because we presuppose God and his existence. Now, what I mean by this is that it's like using circular reasoning. If I say, oh, I've had a religious experience, oh, and God exists, I'm not proving God through the religious experience. I have already assumed God exists. That's why I was able to put God's name to the experience. If you can kind of see where I'm coming from, it's a bit confusing at first. So he says that we can't see miracles as supernatural events because if you think about it, miracles, on one hand, they're proof for the existence of God. We cannot see them as supernatural events which violate the laws of nature and are proof for the existence of God. We cannot see them as this. Why can we not see them as this? Well, because it presupposes God. It assumes that God already exists. And then on the other hand, he says you can't even see miracles as natural events because for science, that's just an anomaly which is going to be tested upon various hypotheses and come up with something. And also, if you see a miracle as a natural event, then it loses its supernatural mystical element, which is what people gain from its noetic quality. It loses it. So it's no longer a miracle, as it were. It's just an event of nature, an unusual event of nature. So he says it's impossible for us to know that miracles occurred, and so therefore he rejects the concept of miracles. So what altogether in this video I'm doing is I'm showing you why people would say the idea of miracle is incoherent. And I guess I would like to end by saying that it takes one to know one. So it takes someone who believes in God and a miracle to actually understand how the miracle works and all this. And I think it's the same, that it takes a scientist who understands science and everything to actually understand why that actually this is just a natural event. I think that's important to know. And another last thing before I end this video is that nowadays people do not reject miracles on ontological grounds. They reject on epistemological grounds. Now what I mean by this is that we don't reject that Jesus walked on water by saying, oh, because he didn't walk on water. No. We reject the fact that Jesus walked on water as an example because we don't know that actually he walked on water. It's not that it didn't happen. We're not certain that he actually walked on water. If you can see that subtle difference, then you'll be able to understand what I'm talking about. Anyway, I hope this video helps, and please visit my blog.